All right, hello everybody and welcome. We're going to be discussing myth and dream in fantasy, and I suspect we'll be talking about magic and a bunch of other things as well. We'll go where we go here, but we're going to start out with a focus on the role that myth and dreams have in modern fantasy and what modern fantasy can get from being plugged into older stories and myths and I'm joined by Dr. Erik Goodwyn from the Imaginarium, who is a psychologist and
Psychiatrist.
psychiatrist. Sorry, yep. So you can actually prescribe things for people and all that.
Yep.
But very familiar, obviously, with the mind and the ways in which dreams can play a significant role in our narrations about ourselves and everything else. So this is going to be, I think, a really cool discussion. Also, I should mention, Erik, let's mention your book recently published as well. And how is that doing, by the way?
Yeah, going pretty good. King of Forgotten Darkness is first in my series, the Raven's Tale series.
Yeah.
I have 9 books planned in the series, 4 of which now are already written because I finished book 2 and it's in the beta reading phase.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to be pulling a Patrick Rothfuss or George R. R. Martin on you guys. It'll get
Good,
done.
good.
I'm a completionist. I will not stop until it's done, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. So
Awesome. Yeah.
that's
And of
that's where
course,
that's at.
being who you are, I'm sure that I know you well enough to know that you are very familiar with older stories. You and I like to talk about Old English and that sort of thing. And of course, you're very much in tune with some of the classics of the genre, Tolkien and all of that. This is
Mhm.
part of our DNA as writers, I think. But your knowledge of the realm of dreams and that kind of thing is really cool. And I'm sure that's something that you use in your storytelling as well. Is that right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That and so as far as like my academic background goes, I'm very much into the Jungian world, the Jungian psychology, and
So
you
does
know,
Joseph Campbell. So that's perfect. Yeah.
Joseph Campbell and folk tales and myths are a big part of
Yeah.
uh, what we talk about all the time in conferences, and so that plugs into it too. And actually, I had a conference. A few months ago now where basically that was the subject of why are so many Jungians writing novels, right? So I was part of one, and there was a couple of others there.
Huh.
Um, so that was a fun conference. But it's a natural part of the creative process that we then use, in therapy, because myths are really carved out of the same cloth as dreams are,
Yeah.
you know.
They're just communal. They're the collective dreams of a culture, aren't they?
Right. So a folk tale, for example, this is one of the most fascinating things I've come across in Jungian therapy is when a person has a major crisis in their life, they will oftentimes have a very powerful dream that looks a lot like a folk tale. And this is one of the first things that Jung himself noticed, and many of his followers have done this, since then, talked a lot about it. And I think what's going on is with folktales, you get these fragments, um, and they kind of coalesce together in the process of continued many generations of storytelling will condense it down into something really powerful. Like I
Yeah.
just did a video on my TikTok channel about Cinderella and how Cinderella is talking. It's obviously talking about maltreatment, childhood maltreatment, because that's the setup. But then the fantastical elements tell us what is going on inside. And
Mm.
right. And because that's the best language to use for these internal dynamics, which are otherwise very vague and nebulous and difficult to comprehend. So when we dream, we do this. We put these narratives into simpler but kind of magical form, and then you see it. So like in the case of Cinderella, she really kind of gains a foothold on her problem when either the fairy godmother or the spirit of her dead mother, depending on which version you're looking at, because
Right.
this is a story told all over the world. And in fact, the Grimm's version, she actually casts a spell and resurrects her mother's spirit, who then gives her the dress. And I'm like, whoa, that's like necromancy, man. That's badass.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the
I'm like,
Grimm's,
why did they
man.
put that in the Disney movie? Daggone it,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think if you childhood maltreatment is something that all humans and all cultures have encountered in one dimension or another.
Yeah.
And so I think it's such an important piece of the human experience that we have these arc what we'd call archetypes as innate responses that help us manage those sorts of things. And it's always in fantastical form. So that was one, like we were talking you were talking earlier before we started, like what are the inspirations? So like folktales are a biggie because that's
Yeah.
really targets the stuff, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish in your story. Well, folktales have encountered that problem across the ages. So it
So
really helps to look at that.
people back then did not have therapy, but they had folk tales.
Yeah,
They
that's
had
right.
myths, right? Which
Yeah,
do perform, among other things, a similar function, don't they?
absolutely. Like I always say, like on my channel, I'm always saying that before there were psychiatrists and therapists, there were storytellers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the mind is it's got its natural storytelling process that's going on all the time in the background through dreams and, sudden images that pop out of nowhere. And you're like, what is that all about? It's really worth paying attention to.
Storytelling is a means by which we make sense of our experience. We
Hmm.
impose a narrative on our experience that helps us to grapple with it. And dreams are performing a similar thing, are they? I mean, you know more about dreams than I do. So the theory behind dreams here and how this relates to storytelling and fantasy specifically, because I think fantasy is the most willing to engage with dreams and with archetypes of all the genres of literature. It is the most open-armed when it comes to just going with these crazy, unrealistic elements that like magic or
Hmm.
just the surreal or the bizarre and etc.
Hmm.
And often it does, I think. Stephen Donaldson wrote a couple great essays on epic fantasy too, where he suggests that the journey that the protagonist goes on performs really important psychological functions for the reader, who
Yeah,
is in fact vicariously going on that journey and
absolutely.
imparting a sense of meaning to the reader, that life does make sense, that we have a place, that we can be empowered in a world where we often feel disempowered and meaningless. Stories can confer that sense of meaning, and that's just, I think, an incredibly important thing, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. 100% agree there. That's essentially so we often talk about dreams, but the reality is that, so there's a process that in the brain where we're doing this all the time. We're trying to take all the massive amounts of information that flood the brain and put it into some kind of palatable format.
Hmm.
And the time during which the brain is most active is when we're asleep and dreaming, particularly REM sleep. But it's really kind of in the background all the time, especially if you're not working on any specific tasks.
Hmm.
So there's a whole field of psychology called the study of spontaneous thought, and
Okay.
it's about what about those thoughts that just pop into your head unbidden. Like I'm not deliberately thinking about going to the pub and having a pint or something like that. It's just stuff pops up out of nowhere. It seems random, but it really isn't when you study it.
Hmm.
And dreams are an intense form of that. And what they do is they will package my current life situation into an as if narrative. They'll say,
Huh.
my life is proceeding as if X is happening. So you're absolutely right about fantasy being the best able to really manage that because there's no rules in fantasy. You can have anything literally happen, and because the mind wants to use metaphors all the time, um, fantasy allows those metaphors their most fullest life because you don't have to worry about laws of physics and all those kind of pesky things.
Right.
Magic can happen and weird little creatures can pop out of nowhere. A good example would be the story Rumpelstiltskin,
Uh-huh.
right? So that one's actually called in folktale studies the magical helper.
Hmm.
And what's going on here? That one is about unrealistic caretaker expectations. So in the versions of that story all over the planet, um, the daughter of the story is expected to spin gold out of straw, which is impossible. So what happens? Well, this magical creature pops up out of nowhere and says, "I can do it for you." Well, psychologically, that's basically a complex. It's popping up within yourself, and it's a perfectionist complex. It says, I have to do this because in the story, it's always life or death, right? The king locks her in a tower and says, do this or else you die. And that's what it feels like when we're put that kind of expectation on us as
Hmm.
children. And so, but the co and the complex allows us to do it. So Rumpelstiltskin manages to do the magic, but at a heavy cost.
Right.
It has to be your firstborn child. So what does that represent? That represents our creativity, our generativity. So the
Mm.
cost of being able to manage these impossible tasks is very, very high. And the only way for her to get out of this mess is to guess the name of the kill of the not the killer, but the creature. She has to guess the name of the creature. What does that mean? Well, that means, first of all, she or a helper of hers, depending on the version, goes into the forests trying to find the name and actually catches the creature dancing around in the forest saying his name. So then when he comes to her in the tower, she says, "I've got your name." And it the name varies a lot depending on where you're coming from. But well, what does that represent? That represents, okay, first of all, going into the dark forest is going within. It's going into the unconscious where it's dark because I don't know, really know what's going on in there.
Mm.
And the magical elements represent the psychological and emotional elements that we don't have a real easy way to visualize except using symbols and metaphors, right? And in that instance, learning the name is a lot like naming the demon in an exorcism, right? You have power over it once you have a name for it.
Right.
As soon as she says the name, the little creature disappears, or he explodes, or he turns into a dish and a spoon, or something, depending on the version. Well, that's basically that whole story is about how do I deal with a perfectionism complex? All right, at first I have to recognize how costly it is. Second, I have to go within and understand what it's really about, learning the name. That's what that symbolizes. So
Right.
you can
Right.
see how a story like this that deals with something that all cultures around the world have dealt with, unrealistic expectations placed on a child. That's something that transcends all cultures. So this is the answer to it, but it's in this dreamlike form.
Mm.
And I think when you hear the story, when the psyche is always trying to create stories about what my plight is or my current situation. I hear a version of this, I grab onto it. I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, that's it. That's the thing. That's what it is. And so it resonates, and we like the story, and so it perpetuates across many generations, and it survives as different changes and variations and goes back to the original form.
Yeah.
Now
Fascinating.
you can't do that in any other genre except fantasy,
That's
right?
it. That's it. It's fascinating because, you mentioned the power of names and the link between knowing the name, the true name, especially for something, and the
Yes.
conferral of power. This is something we see all over modern fantasy. Ursula Le
Mhm.
Guin's Earthsea books, for example, the magic depends upon largely knowing the true name, the ancient form of this,
Yeah.
and creating a bond between the self and the thing that you're trying to do magic over. So that is really cool, and the idea that we call this magic, but there is a actual psychological process
Yeah.
going on here. The conferral of power being key to it, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. It's we call it magic, but it's really about emotional symbolism.
Yeah.
If it's done well, and it will resonate like the reason why the naming bit is so important across so many different stories, and that's across cultures as well, is because language is the tool of the ego, of the consciousness.
Uh-huh.
And that's how I understand and grasp stuff is by using language. This is why therapy works too.
Yeah.
And so that's an important piece of this relatively unknown thing that's plaguing me. I don't know what it is. I don't understand this feeling, Well, if I can name it, now I have the context for it.
Yeah.
So the ego can now join in and participate in this complicated process, and it helps them to, move forward.
Right. Think too of how many moments in fantasy stories where something getting its name is a moment of empowerment. Let's just
Oh,
use let's go through it in a Jungian way, the story of
yeah.
Bilbo Baggins in The Hobbit, right? Which we can plot pretty precisely in Campbellian terms, the hero's journey and all of that, which
Mhm.
definitely borrows heavily from Jungian psychology. So you have Bilbo in the beginning in his very womb-like space, the Shire. We all want to live in the Shire, right? It's so cozy
Right?
and
Who
all
wouldn't?
that. And of course, Gandalf, the mentor figure, comes along and boots Bilbo out of that comfortable space because that is the role of a mentor, is to put you out into the big bad world and make you grow up a bit, right? And then
Hmm.
Bilbo goes on various adventures along the way. He fails initially, which is appropriate, when he tries to burgle from the trolls, for example.
Hmm.
The mentor has to step in and help out at this stage.
He goes
But
to the
later,
underworld.
Bilbo becomes more empowered, and he gradually becomes actually a significant part of this party, that he has an important role to play. He's not just baggage. And this happens largely at a moment when he's separated from the party. He is in what Campbell calls the belly of the whale, when he
Right.
is deep under the mountain and encounters Gollum and finds the ring, the treasure, which
Mhm.
will play obviously a huge role in everything.
Yeah.
And he also later, he's had this sword from the troll cave for quite some time, but it's only when he uses the sword actively and kills the spiders in Mirkwood and helps to save his friends. So now he's not just more than baggage; he's actually, in a sense, becoming the hero of this story. And he slays the spiders and uses this sword, which then he names. That's the moment when he names it Sting. That
Hmm.
is a key thing, I think. That is when, and Tolkien was, maybe consciously or unconsciously, but definitely drawing from a very powerful and ancient narrative here when Bilbo names the sword Sting.
Hmm.
And of course, Bilbo from there on really is making huge moral decisions, such as when he decides to withhold the Arkenstone from Thorin
Yeah.
and give it to Gandalf and Bard and the others in order for them to bargain with Thorin, because he's making a moral decision here at the
Hmm.
end of the whole thing. So he's really grown up through this story in a very Jungian sense. We've seen the maturation of this character into a moral being, really.
Hmm. Yeah.
So. Yeah, the conferral of the name though in that moment, I think it just says it all, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And in many, many cultures, you're not even an officially a real person until you haven't been named by either the tribe or your father or,
Yep.
somebody
That's
important.
Ursi again. You get your real name when you're
Yeah.
in a sense baptized as a not really, it's in a river, but you're given your true name by a sorcerer who knows the nature of names at that moment when you're ready to be an adult. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. And the name now puts it into a context that it wasn't there before, right? Before you have a name, you're just this entity floating in the void, right? A
Yeah.
name now means you have a point in the cultural grid now. And so now you are a part of a landscape, so you belong. It's super important for all kinds of, and that applies not just to social positioning, but mental positioning too. If I'm able to name a complex, for example, like Rumpelstiltskin, what is
Right.
that in therapy? What that looks like is, oh, there's that thing that happened to you, and it caused this emotional cluster of things going on that you keep experiencing. That's that again. Oh yeah, okay. So I'm named it, and now I have more power over it because I can
Yeah.
contemplate it, I can be objective about it, and so forth. That's the magic there.
And it's a true kind of magic too, because how many times in life have we learned the name for a concept that we had just a vague understanding of, and
Hmm.
learning the name helps us to have a tighter grip on that concept, right?
Hmm.
I think that and being able to place it in the world, it is empowering, isn't it?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Definitely, definitely.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it's a big piece of how that whole magic, like you say, works. Magic, that can segue into a conversation, a whole conversation about magic,
Let's do
and
it.
like so in fantasy. You've got your like super systematic magic in like Sanderson, for example. But um, in a lot of fantasy, if I think it really resonates if it connects on some emotional level, like if it
Uh-huh.
makes sense on an intuitive level that's hard to verbalize, and they're so your soft systems, and that's where those work
Right.
really, really well, I think.
They do
And
feel much more intuitive. Yes. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so if you're using like in your Dan stories,
Uh-huh.
you're talking about how, it's basically connecting into the field that is the Adam.
Right.
Unless I'm messing it up here, but I mean, I
No?
just finished book two, and that is an expression of the connection with the one.
Yes.
Yeah, either a Taoist or a Neoplatonist or however, whatever it was that you were inspired by there.
Uh-huh.
But or the Force, right? That's another example of a similar kind of
Yes.
system. The one thing that's the source of all. That's an element you can find all over the place.
Right.
And
And you do it
um,
through these songs of origin, which is
yeah,
an ancient language that brings you
ancient
back
language.
to the
Mhm.
beginnings of things with a true understanding of what it is. Yeah.
Unless you have an elf shard, and then you can cheat.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, there's a thinker named I'm probably going to butcher the name, but Mircea Eliade who writes
Yeah.
about this thing, right?
Mhm.
You've read Eliade, I'm
Mhm.
sure, before.
Oh,
Uh,
yes, absolutely.
the idea of the origin time, creation time, I think is what is the phrase,
Dream
right?
time.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, he draws from the concept of the Alcenjira time of the Australian Aborigines, and he applies that concept across many, many different cultures. And it's a neat idea because in Australian mythology, dream time, it's not a specific event in history, it's a different time.
yeah,
So it's like outside of our linear time. It's more of an eternal time.
right.
And and when he talks about that, he's saying that when they perform rituals or spells or whatever it is, they're basically kind of shifting into the dream time. Now, psychologically, what's going on there
Huh.
is that you are shifting from a linear type of consciousness
Yeah.
that would be from any neuroscientist out there, you're talking about in terms of like EEG, you're on a theta wave, or not theta wave, excuse me, but more like an alpha and gamma wave
Okay. I wouldn't
signature.
know the difference, so you can say either one.
Yeah, I can say anything and it would sound right, but then you're shifting into a more theta rhythm, which is associated with more dreamlike consciousness that's loosened associations, less concerned about linearity,
Uh-huh.
and more in terms of images and symbols. And so it's basically shifting from like everyday consciousness of I've got this task A, B, C, D to a dreamlike consciousness which says, what is the big picture
Yeah.
in metaphors? Like so.
You're outside of time, in other
Yeah,
words.
at that point you are because you're
Right.
doing this and the you're talking about ancient um inspirations. Beowulf does this a lot,
Hmm.
especially in the second half where he's giving us a story about what's going on, but then he tells us about what the future is and the past, and it
All
just
these
sort
side
of
stories. Yeah.
yeah, and he blends it all together, and as you're reading it, the effect of it, at least it was on me, was to get shifted into that theta rhythm, into the dream time, where
Huh.
he's talking about the big picture overall
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
saying, yeah, he's facing the dragon now, but here's all the stuff that happened back in the past up to this point, and also here's where things are going, and it ain't good,
Right.
and all that. And so
Yeah.
it becomes more dreamlike there at the end of the poem.
That is definitely the concept I was going for again with the Songs of Origin is
Yeah.
that you're outside of time, that you are connecting with that in a realm of origins, which
Mhm.
is essentially that's how the true dreams work, which is essentially a memory of the future is I think one way
Mhm.
to refer to the true dreams
Yeah.
in that you're outside of time when you're in this realm and everything is in an eternal present of a sort.
Yeah.
So the idea that you
And
could,
you definitely managed to get that across, I think. And that
yeah,
really,
yeah,
if you get the feel of that, and
hmm
when you're we get the same effect in hypnosis, and you get the same effect when
yeah,
you're discussing dreams or in dreams. You're outside of time at this point.
yeah,
And so it's not just something that you cooked up. It's a reflection of a real process that actually happens to
huh,
consciousness. Well, whether you believe that reflects some kind of deeper philosophical or ontological reality is up to you,
right.
but the psychological part of it is definitely very accurate
Yeah,
there.
you mentioned hypnosis. This is something you have some knowledge of as well.
Mhm.
It's relevant to your field. And yeah, what's the process there? What's happening actually when one is being hypnotized?
So hypnosis techniques are designed to get you into the dream time. That's a quick and easy way to put it.
Okay.
So that you can so that you can approach whatever emotional challenge that you're dealing with from that lens, because a lot of times people get stuck in that more linear mode of thinking and they just can't figure it out. Like you can't figure out how to deal with if it's anxiety or if it's smoking cessation or whatever the particular challenge is. I
Uh,
often use hypnosis for trauma because I found it's extremely helpful to get someone who is suffering from tons of PTSD symptoms. And what the problem is in that instance is that your emotional parts of your brain think that the trauma is still happening, and so you're constantly in fight or flight mode.
mm,
And hypnosis is very good at helping to shift that from it's happening right now, it's happening right now, it's happening right now, to it's in long-term memory now. I don't need to invest it with so much emotion because it's not really life or death.
mm,
So how do I do that? Basically, I have to draw someone into this more dreamlike space by having them focus not on the stuff that happened yesterday, what do I got to do tomorrow, in your head stuff, like overthinking things, and say, where am I right now?
huh.
In the very moment. All right. So I'm shifting now into the eternal present.
Yeah.
So I'm really, in your magic system, I'm tapping into the Eden.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Right.
On purpose. And in fact, even writing a fantasy has very similar, you're doing very similar things by you're trying to almost draw the reader into a state of hypnosis too, so that they can experience the images, in the moment, right?
And that's a
And
fascinating observation because the way storytelling worked for most of human history is you'd have a bard or a shope or
yeah,
some storyteller of the of that tribe or culture or whatever it might be, and that person would be usually with the accompaniment of a musical instrument
yeah,
chanting this piece, and communally people are just they're absorbed in this, they are
mhm,
transported. And of
yeah,
course, we can experience that to some degree as well when we're with our book,
yeah,
in our comfortable chair, I
yeah.
guess, right? Is that a similar thing going on there?
Absolutely. Movies do the same thing, right? You're in a dark
Oh,
room
yeah.
and you're assaulted by images. You lose track of where you are specifically, and the self kind of dissolves a little bit, and you get absorbed in the narrative of the story. And in a
Ah,
book, if it's a well-written book, of course, then you do the same thing. You sneakily get the reader into the head of the POV character, whoever it is.
hmm,
You inundate them with like sensory imagery, and if it's like an immediate scene, like Steven Erickson does so well, he just
hmm.
drops you in the middle of an immediate scene. It works, but it can also work when you're just delivering kind of a narrative summary that, if it's well done, of course.
Hmm.
It's well done by using vivid images. But
Okay.
that trick to both of those techniques, whether it's an immediate scene or a narrative summary, in my opinion, is the vivid imagery, because then it draws you to the present and the image and the here and now and the sensory, and gets you out of the thinking and judging mode.
Yeah.
And when hypnosis happens, so I pull someone into that through these various techniques. Some of them are like repetitive or focus on breathing or whatever it is. And then rituals do the same thing too, with
Rituals, of course. Yeah.
music,
Yeah.
fire, vivid, what they call sensory pageantry in cognitive science of religion,
Hmm.
and get myself into this mode where I can accept the images as they are, as if it were happening, as that word, as if right now. And then if I know what I'm doing, I can gently guide them to the place where they have told me they want to go, which is, let's say in this case of trauma, to a place where they're in a safe place that I use their image for it. A lot of times it's a beach. I'm not sure what's up with that. It wouldn't be for me, but lots of people love that's like their happy place.
I prefer the forest, but okay.
Yeah, see, now you're talking.
Yeah.
And so then you do that, and then you have those memories safely tucked away somewhere. And I'll use images like um, a crystal ball, right? Some people use more modern images like a tablet, like I can push fast forward and go through the memory, and it doesn't affect me as much anymore, that
Ah,
kind of stuff. I prefer more ancient, because I'm a fantasy nerd. I'll use
Yeah,
Christian.
yeah, yeah.
Or like in Harry Potter, where they have the little prophecies that are little spheres.
Yes.
That's a great image of a memory that's tucked away. I can grab it if I need it,
Yeah.
but I don't really need to be inundated with it like right now because it's not really happening right now. So that's
Right.
one way to do it. But that's kind of how the process and the storytelling process connects with hypnosis. You're doing a lot of the same te techniques if you're good at
Fascinating. So what
it.
you're
Yeah.
telling me is that storytelling is not only important, but it's probably vital to our humanity.
Oh, absolutely. There's a great quote. I forget who it was that said it, but it's the universe isn't made of atoms, it's made of stories.
Uh-huh.
Um, Muriel something or other. I've got to remember the poet's name. She's a
Yeah.
brilliant poet. I'm using it all the time, and I never even give her credit for it. It's very
Oh
sad.
dear. Okay. Well,
Anyway,
yeah, but this is fundamental to
yeah.
what we are. Stories.
That's, oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what dreams are doing all the time. They're creating stories.
Yeah.
A dream, dreams are connected to memory consolidation. This is
Mhm.
something that's very well established in the literature. And, but
And
to
by
me,
memory consolidation, you're basically saying we tweak our memories, we play with them, we kind of, roll them over and over, and in the
yeah,
process, we're changing them too, aren't we?
we're putting the stuff that happened to us and deciding whether or not it goes into long-term memory, much like the Norns do in Yggdrasil. All right, that's
Yeah.
another connection there. That I could do a whole talk about that.
Norns or the Fates and all of
Hmm.
that. Yeah.
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 So yeah, memory consolidation. Now, here's a perhaps surprising fact about memory is that we don't really store memories.
Right.
People talk about that like storage and retrieval of memory. That's not how it works.
Right.
Memories are created by the imagination. And it's like, I'm going to create a mental picture of more or less what happened to me yesterday. And it's very much using the same process that we use when we just imagine stuff
Yeah.
or come up with creative solutions for stuff. It's the imaginations behind all of it.
Right.
Now, in memory consolidation, what we're doing is we're developing a story of what has happened to me, and I've eliminate all the irrelevant fluff. And that's a lot of work for the brain to do, by the way. The hippocampus is just jamming 24/7 doing
Lots
this.
of neurons are firing in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's a kind of a subcortical region. But anyway, so it's doing all that. Now, in the result of that is a story. This is the story of my life up to this point. Here's the important events, bing. And it can change depending on what I'm dealing with from day to day, but that's another matter.
Yeah.
Dreams do, though, is they take that narrative, they break it down into pieces again and say, okay, that's what happened to me, but here's what it means.
Yeah.
It means it's as if this happened. And so, like, say if
And
I'm
they're
facing a
very
difficult,
symbolic, very metaphorical too.
absolutely. If
Yeah.
I'm facing a major challenge, like a decision that I might need to make, say, upcoming, I'm likely to dream of being at a crossroads where one road leads to a barren desert and another one leads to a verdant valley, say.
Hmm.
If that's how it feels, it's as if that's what I'm facing. And so that's
Yeah.
what I'll dream about. And if you take it literally, it's like, what the hell was that about? Maybe I was
Yeah.
watching a TV show but that's not it. It's not at all.
Huh.
It's saying it's as if this is what's going on. So it's super important, you know. And in dreams, of course, I can throw magic and dragons and Godzilla and everything else in there, and everything's fair game
Yep.
because
Just
it's a
like in
metaphor.
fantasy. Yeah.
Exactly. Just like fantasy. So fantasy has the ability to depict the most accurate emotional realities because it's unfettered in that sense.
Yeah.
Like
As in our dreams. Huh.
even science fiction has rules
Yeah.
for the most part. They fudge a lot in science fiction,
They
uh,
do. They
but
do.
they
But I
still
think
we
and I love science fiction. It's not a knock on it, but they are more beholden to physics and at least plausible
yeah.
science, you know.
Right. And that's the part of the fun of it too, is that this
Yes.
really could happen,
Yeah.
plausibly. And that's the
Right.
fun. But that means that they've traded off for that cool factor. They've traded off the ability to truly depict the emotional reality that fantasy is undefeated in. And it will
Yeah.
probably never be beaten in that sense.
So
Because there's
Eric,
no sense doing the same thing dreaming does.
in terms of my memories, then you're telling me that forehand that I hit yesterday when I was in my tennis match is not as good as I'm remembering it. Is that what you're telling me?
I would never say that. It's absolutely as good as whatever you want to imagine it.
Whatever makes me go out there and play tennis again, I guess.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's brilliant. And now, how, if I can ask you this without you doing any spoilers for your books,
Yeah.
how have you incorporated this into your writing?
So, yeah, pretty much in every way that I can think of.
Uh-huh.
So, in my opinion, I think the best fantasies are ones that use the strength of the genre to depict whatever the theme is that you're trying to tackle.
Yeah.
And um, so in mine, I each book that I have tackles a different but related theme. So in King of the Forgotten Darkness, I'm tackling the theme of trauma and recovery
Mm-hmm.
for the most part. Underneath that is the ongoing process of like how do we handle the question of suffering? It's a timeless problem.
Yep.
And so in order to tackle that, I've done a lot of different tricks that use this technique of depicting emotional challenges and realities in concrete, visual, spatial, and magical terms. So like the magic system, for example, uses the idea of having much like Rumpelstiltskin, right? Those little complexes and those little creatures can allow us to do things we couldn't normally do, but what's the cost?
Hmm.
So that's one. Or so when you're learning a spell, for example, it comes with a wizard mark, which marks your body some way and it will afflict you at some random point.
Uh-huh.
So the more powerful you become, the more of these marks you get. So like really powerful wizards, there's two of which in book two that I'm dealing with, and they're facing off against each other.
Oh, cool.
But they're loaded with these marks, but they can do all kinds of insane, powerful things.
Uh-huh.
But it's never for free, you know. And so that's one way that I use it. Another way I use it is in the depiction of the fairy creatures, which are basically the
Ah.
gods of Arantir.
Yep.
And they are just unthinkably old and really, really difficult to fathom.
Hmm.
And they are basically like, in many cases, personifications of archetypal reality. So
Hmm.
in my line of work, an archetype has many definitions, but the one that I've been developing over the years is that it's an evolutionary response to a timeless problem that humans have faced. And most of them are oriented towards social adaptation because humans are extremely social.
Uh-huh.
So, for example, the archetype of the hero's journey tackles the coming of age problem that humans have had since the dawn of time,
Right.
since the dawn of probably before humans, like proto-humans probably dealt with this. Um, the the archetype of the wise old mentor character, whether it's a wise woman or wise man in the forest or whatever, deals with the question of mentoring and how challenging that can be as an evolutionary adaptation. It's
Yep.
in the genome. Now, what
Yep.
does that mean? Well, it means that it can come out of nowhere and you're like, where did that come from? I didn't experience that. I've never learned that. But it hits you like a ton of bricks and
It's
it's
part of our
loaded with
collective
laughter.
memory, you're saying.
Exactly. Exactly. And most people, when you talk about this, they're like, well, how does that work? It's very simple. Right? Just imagine the example I use is the cold reflex. So imagine you grew up in Hawaii or somewhere where it's 85 degrees all year round. And then suddenly, like you've lived your whole life there, your generations have lived there, and then suddenly you show up in Iceland during the winter. And
Yeah.
and there's all this stuff is happening to you now. Like your body, the blood's shifted to the core, you're shivering, you got goosebumps. There's something called the Lewis reaction, where if you're cold long enough, the blood vessels will open
Hmm.
to reperfuse the tissue so it doesn't die, but then it closes up again to conserve heat.
Hmm.
It's very sophisticated. These are responses that are in the genome. You never learned this. You've never experienced it before. You could go your whole life and never need it.
Yeah.
That's how archetypes work. If I
Uh-huh.
face a particularly socially challenging situation like death, grief, rejection from the tribe, all that kind of stuff, the genome responds and says, "Holy crap, I've got to manage this, or else I'm going to die. I'm going to be kicked out of the tribe, which equals death for the
Right.
ancestors." And part of the process is that narrative, spontaneous thought thing, and that's where the archetypes pop up.
Huh.
That's why I might have a dream of a wise man leading me to, somewhere. When I was in therapy, myself, I had a lot of these kind of archetypal dreams. And like
Yeah.
blind child is one that you see in therapy. It's so often it's almost a cliche
Hmm.
where you are given responsibility for a child who has great potential, but is invulnerable, is vulnerable, has superhuman qualities to it, but also could potentially die, very much like Shield Chiefing in Beowulf.
Yes, in the beginning
Unblame,
of
who was
Beowulf.
destined to be the greatest warrior, blah blah blah. An example of that archetype. And in therapy, you see this all the time. And there's a lot of funny variations on it. Like maybe it's the child of some politician or a
Uh-huh.
celebrity, but it's still the same idea. It's like it's got that glamour to it.
Hmm.
What you're doing there is actually you're ushering in a new you, and the child is a future image of where you're going in therapy.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's a bunch of examples of what I mean in terms of how do I use this stuff in the storytelling. So the God characters, like the Raven of the Raven's Tale, is an important one of these. I don't want to spoil too much,
Right.
but then, so what she's doing is guiding the characters in a very similar way, in a way
Mm.
that's mysterious. Like I don't know where this is going, and sometimes I might resist it, and but then the dark characters are the same way too. They represent our more, maybe negative emotions, you might put it.
Uh-huh.
So, like Liam faces this character named the Woodsman, who is this like a wolf, like Wolfman kind of character, and he's very powerful and scary. But he's part of the process too.
Mm.
He's not just a straightforward villain. Like what he does with Liam is important to his journey,
Mm.
even though he's basically a straightforward opposing factor. But then that's how psychology sometimes works. Our emotions that we feel are like we feel like the enemy, but they're actually trying to help us.
Huh.
So that's the complexity that I weave into the narrative.
So you're telling me when I have a dream that something is chasing me and I'm running away from it and I
Mhm.
turn around in the dream to face it, I'm
Yeah,
enacting something that is important and potentially empowering for me.
absolutely. Yeah, because you want to like if and that's another common dream is running away from some kind of scary force.
I feel like I should be sitting on a couch, lying down on a couch right now.
Yeah, yeah, I'll send you my bill. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, that's true. And I mean, I did the same thing in therapy. I was like running from stuff, and my therapist was like, what are we running from?
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, let's figure that out, don't you think? What now? And then he would do things like, well, imagine you're back in the dream now, and instead of running away from it, you turn around and face it. What happens then?
Yeah.
Tell me how that looks to you and what emerges from that process. That's called active imagination, and it can
Yeah.
be very insightful because you're basically, again, it's kind of like hypnosis where you're drifting and you're inviting them to go back into that space and dream the rest of it out, but with a different behavior.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I,
So
I also feel like even as a dreamer, sometimes I'll have a dream like that where I'm running from something and then I'm half asleep and half awake and but the dream I'm actively telling the dream where to go and I'm telling
yeah,
myself turn around, face that thing and beat it, and
yeah.
I'll dream that. I
Mhm.
mean, am I crazy or is that
No, absolutely not. There's actually some studies on that with experienced lucid dreamers.
okay?
That's what you're talking about. A lucid dream is where you're dreaming, you're dreaming,
Yes.
and you're able to stay in it. That's
Yes. And
talent.
even make decisions in it.
Yeah, and even affect it.
Yeah.
Usually you can't change it completely, but you have partial control over it.
Right.
So what they did is they had a group of these people, and they said, okay, if I have a dream where you're running away from something,
Right.
turn around and face it and see what happens. And what usually happened is that whatever was chasing them turned into something that was benign
Uh-huh.
or harmless. It was almost like the Harry Potter, like ridiculous, right? You
Yeah.
poof, it turns into something silly and funny.
Right. Right.
And that's so what you're doing is, in a fantastical sense, facing the monster is engaging with that thing that the ego perceived to be bad and
Right.
negative,
Right.
right? And so that's what that is. And like so the tagline to King of the Forgotten Artists is hiding from your demons only makes them stronger. That's what it's getting
Right. So
getting at.
that's Ged naming the dragon. I'm giving you your name. I'm turning around. I'm facing you. I'm
Yeah.
naming you.
I'm naming you, and now I have a better grasp of the situation. I have
Huh.
more control over it. I can manage it better. I might not be able to just banish it away, right? That
Right.
usually doesn't work. But
Yeah.
I can at least engage in a conversation with it rather than just running away. That's just avoidance.
Huh.
Yeah.
Very
So
cool.
all
And
that stuff I
and we
try to
enact
weave
that
into
in
my
the
story.
stories. We enact it in these stories.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So when in the earlier parts of the of King of the Forgotten Darkness, he's running away from the woodsman
Yeah.
all the time. But then there's this very important part of the story when he stops doing that and he turns around and faces it. Now, I won't reveal what happens at that point, but it's very
Yeah.
psychologically. Now, some of the stuff I put in there was deliberate because I know, dream science and all that, and I'll weave it in there. But sometimes I've just put it in there because it feels right and I don't really know what it's about.
Yeah.
And I let it happen because I know that that's part of the process. And I'm
Following
sure
your
you did
gut.
that
Yeah.
too. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure you did. And I think most storytellers do that more than anything. Like if they're
Yeah.
really good, they like I'm sure Tolkien was like this because he just
Oh,
sort of
he certainly was. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
We
And
can
it just
find, we
turned
can
out
see that in his letters. You read his letters and you'll know that he was in many ways what they call a pantser, you know.
yeah. Hmm.
And there were points in his story where he was like, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I don't know where this is going. I'm stuck, you know. So
That's the plight of the pantser.
yeah, for sure. But even
Yeah,
a planner like myself, even in the initial stages of thinking through this, these things come from my unconscious, even as
yeah,
I'm outlining. And in the process of telling the story, of course, the story speaks to, I feel like it's the story speaking to me and telling me
yeah.
where to go. And that's a point where I want to listen because there's this creative thing going on
Hmm.
where I'm in this flow. I'm going to call it flow.
Yeah,
And this creative flow. And in that moment, you could wake up in the middle of the night and with just out of the blue, this idea comes to you and you know where your
yeah.
story is going.
Hmm.
Or,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's just like you, and I think that's where you have to, I understand where the idea of prophecy comes from and all of that.
Hmm.
They must have been
Yeah.
incredibly um, open and creative people who would hear these voices. This is where you need, this is, this is the vision that
Hmm.
you're being filled with. And it feels like it's coming from somewhere external, even.
Yeah.
The story is speaking to me, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's a whole body of literature written about that thing that you're talking about there,
Hmm.
flow, and what you're actually doing there is in Jungian psychology, we call it active imagination, where you learn how to quiet your mind and
Yeah,
just attend to the inner emergent stuff that you're not directing it, you're just in a receptive mode, and that's it.
right.
And it's very much like dreaming while you're awake. And once you get good, it takes practice,
Yeah,
and it's good to have someone helping you do it at first. But then when you get good at it, you can really access that constant wellspring of creative energy. And if I get stuck, that's a lot of times what I'll do. Like, I don't have any idea where I'm going with this. So I'm just going to sit back for a second and shut my brain off. Just, okay, ego, shut up. I'm just going to listen.
yep.
And then stuff pops up, and some of it is like, what the hell is that? I
Yeah,
don't know. But some of it is like, yeah, that might work. That kind of feels right. So I'll see where that goes. And so it's great. And I think that's maybe something that a lot of creatives try to develop. It's a skill. It really is a skill. It's not
mm,
easy to do necessarily out of the box. And
yeah,
we don't, our education system is not geared towards this kind of stuff. Like we don't teach
no.
kids how to do this. We should, but we don't.
We really
So
should.
most of
Yeah.
us have to learn this as adults if we ever learn it.
Yeah. Considering how vital it is for us
Mhm.
and to engage in this kind of creative process.
And
Uh,
all of the ethnographies that I've read, I think many indigenous cultures actually do train this much better than we do in our
yeah.
modernized,
Yeah.
hyper individualized computer society. And
Well, this is what frightens me about the whole, the idea that people are allowing AI to take over creative realms because
don't get me
they're
started.
misunderstanding how vital the process itself is, not
Mhm.
just the product, not just the story or the piece of art, or that's the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
What's beneath the surface is the whole process and how vital that is for us to be human.
Yeah. Yeah. And those large language models that they base that the AI uses are
Mm,
it's just a prediction of like, well, okay, given this bunch of sentences, what's the most likely word to be next based
yeah,
on this massive database? Well, there's no creativity there.
right.
It's just a statistical. trick.
You might as well ask an AI to do your dreaming for you, It's
Yeah,
the same
right.
thing. You
And what
need
you'll
that
get
dreaming. You need that process, right?
exactly, if you do that, what you'll get is basically just a amalgamation of what other people have dreamed. So
Right.
how the hell does that help you?
Right.
It doesn't. And as AI guys will tell you, if you feed those products back into the AI database, you wind up with incoherent nonsense pretty quickly. It collapses. So they
Yeah.
have ways to avoid that
Right.
embedded in the program. So um, what that means though is that if all you ever use is AI stuff, you're just basically using stuff that's already been said
Right.
with nothing new ever added. That's like the death of creativity.
Yeah.
That's ugh,
It's
I hate
stale.
that.
It's
Man,
stale. It's yeah,
I
to
object
me,
strongly.
yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, we won't get sidetracked on that, but yeah.
Nah, true. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, but brilliant. Yeah. Anything that you want to add to the conversation while we're at it now? Because this has been fascinating for me, actually. The links here between myth and dreams and magic and fantasy. I mean, this is the stuff that I live for, and I feel like you've got such a wonderful way of speaking about it all. But is there anything that we haven't covered yet that you wanted to talk about?
Uh, I just recently did a video on the show don't tell debate,
Yeah.
and I think modern fantasy, and maybe, your viewers will agree or disagree and want to comment on this. But I think we have beaten that to death so much into our modern writers
Yeah.
that they've lost track of how to write a decent narrative summary,
Yeah.
right?
Exposition plays a role. It's important. It's not like you can write without any exposition at all, right?
Yeah, although some writers try to do that, like Erickson
Yeah.
does that. Right? He just plops you in there and good luck figuring out what the hell is going on. And he makes it work because he's Steven Erickson and he's ridiculously awesome. But
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, like stuff that I've tried to help people with, it doesn't work as well. And so that got me thinking, and I just started reading the Bulgariad, um,
Uh-huh.
right? And that's an older fantasy, right? So it's
Older-ish. Yeah.
older-ish, right? Not super old, but not like Tolkien or anything, but it's more kind of your traditional kind of throwback type. And the very first couple of paragraphs, he does a stupendous job of establishing how Garion has lived his life up to that point. And it's a narrative summary. It's just exposition, but he does it in a very artful and I think dreamlike kind of way
Uh-huh.
because he just sprinkles in there like little snippets of like how he's sitting and looking up at the ceiling and thinking about the flower in the kitchen and all this kind of stuff. And he talks about the kitchen and house, and he conveys the feeling of it without plopping us into an immediate scene,
Right.
like as a 9-year old or whatever it
So
is.
more of a slow burn immersion into this
Well,
sort.
it's slow, but it's also kind of fast because he
Okay.
covers a huge period of time with this.
Huh.
And by the end of a couple of paragraphs, we're right there with Garion. And we didn't
Uh-huh.
need to go through a bunch of scenes or a bunch of like rigid flashbacks where you are literally going back in time, and all of that. And I think it's this show don't tell ideology has gotten pushed so hard
Yeah.
that writers are kind of afraid to do that. And you're missing so much, right? It's too much like a description of a movie rather than using the strength of prose, which
Mm-hmm.
allows us to do like what the Beowulf poet did,
Right.
which is to weave past, present, future all into this one powerful like punch.
Yeah.
And then, so like at the moment when he faces the dragon, we already know pretty much what's going to happen and what has happened for the last 50 years. And that's what makes that moment so powerful,
Yeah.
And
I
so like I
agree.
wanted to throw that in there. That's a psychological technique as
Well, and
well.
I think the use of dreams in fantasy is similar in a sense. Like I'm
Mm,
reading finishing
exactly. Yeah.
Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn by Tad Williams, which
It's on
is
my TBR, that last monstrosity of a book.
oh, you're gonna love it. You're gonna love it.
Okay. All
It
right.
is filled with dreams.
Oh,
For one
great.
thing, you're gonna go to town on the sections of dreaming. Each
Okay.
place there's a whole like dream realm that is separate, and this is something that you see also. It's a thing in fantasy. Look, you've got it's a really important. The dream realm is really important in series like Wheel of Time, for
Yeah.
example, as a realm that is integral to the story, but and not only a place where you work things out, but where things actually happen that
Yeah.
affect the real world even. Um,
Mhm.
and it's similar in a sense in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, where there's a dream realm that is more than just dreaming. It actually affects the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And that's realistic because when we dream, our whole psychology can shift from one dream. If the unconscious grabs the issue really powerfully,
yeah,
and this is where a therapist can really help maximize the benefit from it. So if a patient brings a dream in and I recognize, oh, this is a biggie, we need to really hit this one hard,
huh,
then it'll weave itself into the person's conscious awareness and they'll be able to grasp whatever challenges they are dealing with better.
huh,
Yeah. So Jung called
wow,
these the big dreams. We want to really make sure we pay attention to those. So it's not just this passive observation thing. It's an active consolidation of who I am. It's
yeah,
identity formation and future planning and all this stuff. So the fantasy depiction of stuff happening in the dream world, happening in the real world, is a great metaphor itself for how this process works in the so-called real world.
yeah. And another
Yeah.
level of that is that as you are reading the story and participating in the story, you
Yeah.
are working out
Yeah.
things
You're doing
that
it too. So you're
you're doing.
actively participating in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Reading a story is not just this passive thing. It grabs you and moves you forward. If it's well done, if it's well done.
Brilliant. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll finish on that thought because that is fantastic. I've enjoyed this thoroughly, and I know my viewers will as well.
Yeah, same. This is great.
Erik's channel will be in the description. I'll also put a link to your book, which is out there in the world. It is available. It is full of rich insights. If you want to go on a journey, that is going to help you and work through some things and feel a sense of meaning and empowerment. I think would be a good place to go.
It's also not 500,000 words. So just think about that. It's
That's a
not
good
gonna
selling
be,
point too.
yeah, not
I
gonna be a huge
mean,
time commitment for you.
yeah, that should be part of the pitch, right? First of all, it is not 500,000 words.
Yeah.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thank you so much, Erik. I always appreciate you and the time that you've given here. And I look forward to our next discussion.
It's been fantastic. I love this. Thanks for
All right.
having me.
All right. But that is it from us for now. Until next time.